Welcome to the Lunch and Learn video series brought to you by the Gateway Down Syndrome Association. Today we welcome Lauren Peffley, Community Education Coordinator and Advocate with Crisis Aid International. They provide relief efforts locally and equip those who are beyond the crisis to take responsibility by providing programs that train, inspire, and move them to independent, self-sustaining living. Lauren will discuss digital and internet safety for the whole family, including what parents can do to protect their loved one with Down syndrome.
Thank you so much for giving me this time and space to talk a little bit more about navigating the online world safely. And I think we all know that is a pretty big undertaking. That's a lot of different things. So we're going to talk about a few different ways that we can provide digital safety for the whole family. That's a big part of what we do at Crisis Aid. So wanted to go through a few different things and give a little bit of a roadmap of sort of what I'm going to talk about throughout the rest of this presentation on a little bit more about Crisis Aid, our work, why it matters to us, why we do it, and just wanted to give you kind of a through line of hope that we are a program that provides resources and support. So if any of these things do sound similar, if your child or anyone you know is going through any of these things and you need resources, support, or advocacy, you know out the gate that we provide that advocacy and mentorship. So if you need any of those resources or support, we can provide that for you. So we'll talk about our work and then talk about just things to be aware of. So different risks to look out for, apps to be extra mindful of, where we see a lot of, unfortunately, kids being targeted, particularly kids living with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but just some apps that we see a lot of risks on, and then end with some online safety tips and resources, and hopefully some time for questions and answers, and other discussion points as well. So that's the agenda. That's the roadmap. I like to kind of give that, but just wanted to start off with a little bit more about our work, why it matters to us. As Linda mentioned, we do have a global component. And as you might see, there's an international, the word international is in our name because our work did actually start internationally. So our founders actually started doing crisis aid in different parts of the world. I'm not going to focus too much on our global part of our work because what we're talking about today is much more focused on the US Safe side of what we're doing. But globally, we do have a safe home for survivors of trafficking in East Africa called the Refuge Home. We do have a vocational center for girls and women kind of getting out of exploitation. And we have a series of feeding and medical programs in areas that really don't have a whole lot of access to a lot of that, and work really well with a lot of incredible local folks that are providing really sustainable and amazing resources there. So if you're interested in learning more about our global work, we have a lot of great resources on our website. Encourage you to check that out. But our US Safe work is what's based here in the St. Louis metro area. So that's what I'm going to focus on today because that's where a lot of our digital safety resources and programming exists. So here in the United States, we provide prevention, identification, intervention, and restorative response for survivors of internet crimes against children or online exploitation, as well as sexual abuse and trafficking. The reason we started doing the work around digital safety is because we saw that could be a pipeline to trafficking. And what we want to do is be able to, as much as possible, prevent that from becoming a more serious victimization. So not only can we work with folks who've already had some of those things happen, we also work with folks who maybe are at risk for those things. So groups that are targeted more for that, or kids that are just engaging in maybe some risky behaviors online. So a crime doesn't already have to have been committed against someone for us to be able to work with them. Obviously, the hope and the goal is that prevention piece. If we could prevent that from happening in the first place, that would be the dream. But in case something has happened, we do have advocacy services. Our offices, our crisis intervention offices, are actually located within law enforcement spaces. So we have our offices in police departments. They're really trauma informed. They're really comfortable. That's there in case there is some kind of crisis situation. We can be kind of on site if we need to. We do work really well with specialized in law enforcement units that investigate those things. So if there is a crisis situation, we can be on site. We have a great program called Project Identify that identifies kids that maybe were posting things online. It didn't look like there was any kind of adult that was abusing them in any way, but they were still posting something that they shouldn't have been posting. And maybe law enforcement couldn't necessarily get to that because there's so many other things they had to get to. But we think that kid and that family needs to understand the severity of that, excuse me, and have some mentorship and advocacy around that. And then I'm going to talk more in a little bit about our Children's Anti-Exploitation Partnership, or our CAP program. And I can send all of our resources and brochures to you, Linda, so you have all the digital copies of this in case anyone wants these resources. That's where we do a lot of mentorship around online safety. And then we do have a what's called House of Hope for Survivors of Trafficking, and that's up in Western Michigan. So that's like a real brief overview of all of our programs, but just to let you know, we do have a lot of resources. And to date, over 6,000 survivors of trafficking and exploitation have been served by all of these different programs. And you're not going to see a whole lot of numbers in my presentation, but that's a number that really means a lot to me because I know a lot of those names and faces and stories. And so I'm really proud of that number. So we really want to help as many people as we can with services. So CAP is a program I wanted to focus on because if there is somebody in your life that you know that's struggling with maybe chatting online with people that they didn't really know, or maybe sent some pictures that they weren't supposed to send, or getting on apps that where people were kind of targeting them in some ways, or there are some difficult things going on online. Again, even if there hasn't been a crime that's happened and they just need somebody else to maybe mentor them or talk them through maybe being safer online, all the way up to maybe some of those extreme situations where a crime has been committed and anything in between, they would be a great fit for our CAP program. So in that program, we provide individual and family advocacy, and we also provide that young person with mentorship and empowerment. We try to help them with critical thinking skills and coping skills. If they've been through something traumatic, we try to walk them through kind of how that might affect their brains and their bodies and the way that they act on things or don't act on things. We aren't therapists, we are advocates. So if the family needs a referral to a therapist, we can help with that, but we don't do therapy in our office. But we really try to figure out, what does this family need? What are resources that we can help with, and how can we refer to those while we still keep working with them if they want? Some of our families need some pretty basic needs. So we do have a food box program, so we can help with things all the way as basic as food boxes. We have great volunteers that have provided some really basic needs, household items, things like that. Really try to meet the family's needs, whatever they need. We do have partnerships with law enforcement. So if they have a question for law enforcement, if they're feeling a little intimidated by that, they don't want to ask questions, we can be there with them and be that sort of bridge or liaison between them and law enforcement. And we want to support all family members. So anyone who didn't have anything to do with that victimization or harm, we want to make sure we're supporting everyone in the family. So that includes other kids in the household. We want to make sure parents feel supported. And we also provide a ton of training out in the community. I'm our education person, so that is kind of my joy and my privilege to get to do that. And we have offices in St. Louis County, St. Charles County. We've got offices in St. Anne. We've got Jefferson County, Franklin County, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Colorado Springs, and we're expanding into Illinois and other parts of Missouri, as well as some other states. So we're constantly expanding, and we really want to make sure to provide resources as much as we can. All of the things I'm talking about today are at no cost. So all of our educational services, all of our advocacy services, everything is free. So we don't want that to ever be a barrier. And the last thing I'll talk about is just that we do education stuff in the schools too. So I'll provide kindergarten through 12th grade lessons on digital safety, and I try to make that really developmentally appropriate. So if we're working with kids who maybe have differing needs, I want to make sure that they can understand that and engage with that. I do groups on healthy relationships. We do parent presentations like this in a bunch of different settings. And I also do staff trainings as well. So the staff feels equipped to handle that if they do have kids that come up and say, hey, I've been dealing with this, or they know that some kids are at risk. So again, that's a little bit more about what we're doing. So if there's any way that we can help you or help your young person, want to make sure you know that before we dig into some kind of heavy topics, because this is certainly not an easy topic to talk about. We know that most tweens and teens, just in terms of why this is an important topic, most tweens and teens of all backgrounds, of all demographics, have a social media presence and know how to hide things from parents. You see that kids have had access to the online world from an earlier and earlier age. So a lot of them are very, very savvy at getting around, especially if they've had access to that from a young age. Unfortunately, the majority of online sex offenders know how to glean a lot of information from kids' social media presence, kids' gaming presence, just anything about not just kids, but adults as well, right? They know how to gain a lot of information about us, about what we like, what we don't like, where we live, school, home, different things. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that's NCMEC, that's a acronym that you'll see me using a lot, or you'll see on here a lot. They have a lot of great resources as well. But according to them, they did a study, and this was a while ago, but they had 1 in 5 teens admit to sending nudes. So nude images online. I think that number is probably higher now. And again, that's how many have admitted to sending that. So again, that is something that can be really exploited. And the majority of transaction for sex with kids starts online. So we see that can become really dangerous really, really fast. So just in terms of some risks we want to go over, I'm going to talk through some terms that we think it's important to know, like the legal terms, the acronyms, things like this, things you may have already heard, things you maybe already know, but just want to, kind of lay out what they are. And I do, in my sort of middle school and onward presentations, I do also define these things for young people so they also know what these words mean. So sexting at this point is probably a part of most people's vocabulary, but I still do lay out kind of what that means, especially depending on what demographic I'm talking to. When I was talking to a group of kids in the deaf and hard of hearing program within the special school district, the word nude was a word that was not in their vocabulary, and the interpreter had to get a baby doll and literally mimic what the word nude meant. And these young girls who were in about 8th or 9th grade did not know fully what that meant. And it was just really heartbreaking and very humbling to me to realize that might not be something that was accessible. Just language wise. And understanding wise for them once they got it, they were shocked and embarrassed and didn't understand. So just understanding how that can be manipulated if that understanding isn't there of what's appropriate or what a word means. So anyway, I do try to lay this out in a way that makes sense to whatever audience that I'm talking to. So sexting is just kind of any sexually explicit pictures or messages via phone, computer, any device that anyone is using. Sextortion may be a word that people might not be as familiar with. It's a combination of the words sexting and extortion. And that occurs when somebody threatens to send out another person's private, sensitive, or sexual imagery if they don't either receive more of those images, favors of some kind, or most often money, is what we're seeing, those threats. So the way it plays out is 2 people are chatting with one another. They could be total strangers. They could be people that have been chatting for a long time. And one person either feels pressured into sending a nude image, or maybe they wanted to send a nude image, but oftentimes they feel pressured into it. They send it, and then that other person turns around and says, if you don't send me $500 by this time tomorrow, I'm going to send this picture out to everybody on your followers list. I've got the message ready to send. Or I'm going to come to your school and I'm going to, ruin your life, basically. And that can happen from like, I've seen it. I've worked with kids where they started chatting with someone and within 30 minutes they were being threatened like that. So it can happen really quickly. It actually happens to boys twice as often as it happens to girls. So I tell people this, and I tell the young people this as well. This isn't just happening to girls, and parents need to know that as well. This is happening to boys. If you want to see a representation of this, NCMEC has a video called No Escape Room. And it's an interactive video that shows, and it doesn't show anything graphic, obviously, but it's a 15-year-old boy that goes through this. And it's a really harrowing story. So it's intense, but it's a good representation of how it happens and how quickly it can happen. In terms of why this happens, why teens sext, or why they might get caught up in this, it's a lot of the same reasons why teens have done a lot of reckless things throughout the history of time, right? To fit in, to be cool because of peer pressure, the idea everyone's doing it. It's seen as a new form of flirting or an expectation now. A lot of kids that I've talked to or heard from said that it feels like safe sex. It feels like, okay, teens are not actually meeting up as often. They're not engaging in physical acts of sex. So they feel like this is safer. But in reality, obviously, we know that can be shared, that can be disseminated, that can turn into a very unsafe situation in a lot of ways. But for them, it might feel like a way to feel wanted, to feel good, to feel accepted, all of these things. But of course, it can have these horrible consequences. According to Thorne, which does a lot of research on not just, sextortion, but other digital safety issues. And they do a lot of advocacy as well. They said that 1 in 5 teens had experienced or reported experiencing sextortion, that 1 in 7 were driven to self-harm as a result, and that 81% of the threats occurred exclusively online. So they're, doing some pretty glaring research on this, and just thought that was important and obviously sad to share. So other terms that I think it's important to know, CSAM is the term or child sexual abuse material is the term that's replacing child pornography because it's a more appropriate term. Child pornography is a word that makes it seem like someone could consent to that, and a child cannot consent to that. It is abusive material. So it's any sexually explicit material of a child. That's images or videos. Revenge porn is another term for disseminating images of someone without their consent. So sending out videos or images of someone as a form of revenge. Maybe somebody has broken up with someone, so they think, okay, well, I'm mad at them, I'm going to send this out. It's obviously a horrible thing to do to someone. It's happening to people all the time. Unfortunately, this happens to adults as well, and there's not as many protections for adults. But when it's happening to kids, it's obviously a very serious crime. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, they did a survey with CSAM survivors, people who had their child sexual abuse material images sent out or spread or put online. And 67% of them said that the distribution of their images had impacted them differently than the hands-on abuse that they suffered, because the distribution never ends and the images are permanent. And that's one of the things that's so devastating about this, is that even after maybe a physical abuse end or the physical act ended, it's still something that can go on and on, because unfortunately we can't scrub the internet clean as much as I wish that we could. So some other terms to know are online grooming and enticement. And grooming is something that unfortunately, tragically, has existed for a very long time. It's just with the online world, some of these tactics can be accelerated, they can be faster, and a lot of predators can have access to so many more people at the same time. So online grooming is when a person is trying to form a relationship through online means in order to, for the sole purpose of sexually abusing or exploiting them. Enticement is just kind of the more legal term for that same thing. And it's when an adult is knowingly communicating with a child. They know that they are talking to someone who's under the age of 18. And the whole purpose of that is to get or entice sexual conversations, images, videos, or acts. There are certain cases where even if that young person has not sent a sexual video or nude image, if the adult knows that they're talking to a kid who's young enough and is talking to them in a very sexual way or is trying to get those images or videos, if it's egregious enough, then that adult can be charged with enticement, and that's still a crime, even if the kid hasn't sent anything or done anything in return. Missouri has some weird law, and I'm not a lawyer or a law enforcement, but I've learned a little bit more about that. So that's something that we'll kind of come back to when I talk about reporting it. There might be a way, like if you are catching anything where you're like, oh my goodness, this chat in the, maybe my kid likes to game, and there's all these chats where someone was really being really overly sexual with my kid or doing these things. Getting that information still might be important, because that could be enticement, even if your kid doesn't respond to it. Because it's really, unfortunately, the amount of kids that I talk to where they're being enticed and solicited and talked to like that by tons of people, even if they're just blocking it or not talking to that person, it's really unsettling. So the ways that this is happening, the ways it's playing out, some red flags to look out for, because I don't know, this is unfortunate, but it's also, I guess, it's like a silver lining, I guess, that there's a lot of the same red flags that you see over and over again. So it is something that you can kind of be looking out for, that predators are repetitive, I guess. So to be on the lookout for. So a lot of the ways we see this play out over and over again is that they will build a fake profile looking like whatever they think that young person is looking for. So they'll build a profile looking like a young girl if they think that person is looking for a young girl, or a young boy if they think that that person is looking for a young boy. So they'll build a fake profile and they'll target and groom that young person based off of what they think that person's interests are. Unfortunately, it's getting easier and easier to build fake profiles because AI is getting way more realistic. So they can either make a completely fake picture or take a bunch of pictures offline and like sort of doctor them up and make them look fake. They connect with young people online. It's not always the case, but oftentimes girls are more likely to be targeted on social media sites. So like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat are three popular apps that we see girls being groomed on. For boys, it's more likely that they'll be groomed on gaming sites. Also, everyone should be aware of the dangers of Roblox. And we're going to talk more about Roblox, but Roblox is where one of our detectives is getting the vast majority of his online exploitation cases from Roblox. So I just want to put you on high alert with Roblox, even though it appears to be a kid-friendly app. There's a lot of predatory behavior on Roblox. So I'm going to say that a couple more times today. But yeah, so they'll connect with them on either social media or gaming sites or different platforms. Any platform with a chat feature is inherently risky. Anyone with a friend or a follow request or anywhere where you can connect with people online. And they'll create these fake opportunities for emotional bonding. Whether that's, oh, I'm your friend. Oh, I can help you with this game. Oh, I can give you tips on this. Oh, do you want, a gift card for this, or Robux, or a way to, advance in the game, or mimicking sort of loving romantic relationships. So like, oh, you're going through this, I'm going through this too. Oh, you have anxiety, I have anxiety. Oh, your parents don't understand, my parents don't understand. Oh, you're having trouble at school, I'm having trouble at school. Whatever it is, they'll try and form these loving or romantic relationships or bonds of some kind. And then it can turn into sextortion, threats, other forms of abuse. So it's that hook. It's that sort of like, I'll be your friend, I'll be your boyfriend or girlfriend. And then it's that sort of hook into abuse and other forms of exploitation. So all kids have some amount of risk for these kinds of things. But unfortunately, there are certain identities that are just going to be at higher risk for online exploitation or just being targeted online. So kids who've already experienced some kind of sexual abuse younger, especially once they hit their tween and teen years, that we see a lot of kids who are maybe engaging in slightly riskier behaviors online and offline, and that can create more of a risk for people living with a disability, particularly intellectual and developmental disabilities, or learning or physical disabilities. When we first started collecting our kind of demographics for the CAP program, upwards of, like, I think it was over 70% of the kids that we were serving had some kind of diagnosed disability. And that really struck me. That stood out. And that was 6 years ago when I started here. And so that's something that we see unfortunately, a lot of predators they'll pick up on that and they'll target that. And I know I don't have to, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you know that, but unfortunately in the online world, that's something that happens in the same way it happens in the offline world. So something to be aware of and something that makes me very, very upset. Another group that gets targeted is kids who identify as LGBTQ, especially if they're either not out publicly or they have come out publicly and have not been accepted at home or have been kicked out. That creates a lot of risk. And then kids who struggle very severely with self-esteem and self-worth. Those are the kids, like, really, truly, because we all struggle with self-esteem. We all, especially during adolescence, but I'm talking about kids who can't say or feel anything good about themselves. That can create a lot of risk for that predator to just say one nice thing, and that's all it takes. And that can be really dangerous. So some red flags that things might have happened. This could be online or this could be, something else. But we've seen these with a lot of the kids that we work with. And just to be kind of mindful, there's sudden change in sleeping or eating habits. They're either sleeping all the time, or we see this with kids who are chronically online where they're not sleeping at all, especially at night. They're like all the time online. They're having unusual difficulty regulating their emotions. There's something changed about that. For younger kids, if they're using really sexually explicit language or behaviors that you're like, I do not know where they're being exposed to this, that could mean that somebody is exposing them to that or someone else is telling them these things. For older kids, if there's any kind of substance use or high risk activities, if they're coming home with things that you did not give them, or they've got gifts or things that you're like, I'm not sure where they're getting these things from. If they're losing interest in their previous passions, or they're isolating from friends, family, things they used to really love. If there's any kind of violent behaviors that are coming out towards themselves, others in the household, or if there's any kind of suicidal ideation or signs of depression or self-harm. We're also starting to see some violent behaviors that are coming out where there's like kids kind of inciting violent behaviors towards other kids and like recording it and using it as a way to threaten other kids. 764 is like a name of one of these sort of like internet cults, but we're seeing it. It's like sadistic online exploitation is a name for it. And 764 is just one of the many names for it. And we could do a whole other presentation on it. But if you have any, like, it's actually being named, that's one of them that's being named like actually like a terrorist cell. So if there's any concern that you have about like a kid inciting violence, like telling a kid to do anything violent to another kid, or if there's any self-harm component or anything like that, and there's anything being recorded like that, please reach out to us. I'm going to send our information because we actually are connected to an FBI agent who's like investigating these kinds of things. So that's a very quick snapshot of it, but I can send you more information about it. But yeah, it's a new term called sadistic online exploitation. So I know that's a very short snapshot, but anything where you see, okay, this is either violence towards themselves or violence towards others that is not really related to anything else you've ever seen or coming out of nowhere. It's not related to a mental health thing or any other behavior you've seen. Definitely reach out to law enforcement or some, medical health professionals right away, because it could be something online related. So some apps parents should know. I'm going to send our parent resource packet. Linda, I think you might have gotten that at the one meeting that we met at through Face, but I will send you the digital version of this so you can have it. I'm not going to go over each one of these, but I did want to highlight Roblox again, just because it's one where not only have we seen a lot of predatory behavior, but also the platform owner has not taken real responsibility for cleaning up what he has known. I think there was a lot of known predatory behavior that they were not taking accountability for. So the owner is actually under a lot of fire for like kind of knowing that there was some shady stuff going on and not taking accountability for it, which makes me really, really upset. So it's not a super safe app for your children to be playing on. So there are plenty of games and experiences that are fine and innocuous. So this isn't to say, oh my goodness, you have to get your kids completely off of Roblox. But if your kids are on Roblox, I would highly recommend that you either disable the chat feature or just really, really highly monitor the chat feature, because we really do see like a huge chunk of the exploitation cases we get referred are coming from Roblox. And I know that that's surprising to parents, but just really be vigilant on Roblox, because there are a lot of creepy people on there. And I think that's surprising, but Snapchat and TikTok also, and Instagram, we do get a lot of cases from them. So even though those are more well-known apps, people still do use them as predatory means. Another app I wanted to highlight is like a calculator app or like a Vault app. Vault apps are apps that look like other normal features on a phone, like a calculator or a phone icon or a Google photo icon, but there's like one thing wrong with it, like an extra percentage on there or something like that. Or it's like, oh, why does my kid have multiple calculators on their phone? And a Vault app, it looks like a normal app, but then there's a passcode that you can put in, and then it's a place where you can store secret messages or videos or images. So if you look on your kid's device and there's like 3 calculators and 2 phone icons and other things, that is an immediate red flag that one or multiples of those are Vault apps. And that's a good time to sit down and talk about, okay, what is this and what's inside of it, because it'll look kind of like a calculator until you go in and put a passcode. So I do like to at least highlight that. With AI, I'm going to come back to this if we have time, but I want to get to the tips since we're getting kind of low on time. There are some companion AI apps that I just want people to be aware of, just because things are moving in a direction with companion AI that like can be a little bit scary, but I want to make sure to get to the tips first before we get to that. And then if we have time, we'll come back to that. So the online safety tips, the first thing, I know this can be a lot of overwhelming information at once, but one of the things I find a little bit of grounding and comfort in is that a lot of the tips are things that, one, you're probably already doing with your kiddos. And 2, they've been the same throughout time. So keep doing them, is communicating openly with the young people in your life. Keep letting them know what your values are and what your expectations are. Share the why. I think kids have always been curious about why. Why do we do this? Why is this important? Sharing why that matters to you, why it's important to not look at certain things, why it's important to not chat with certain people, why this is a safety thing, not just I'm trying to ruin your fun thing. Just sharing those things in full and letting them know, no matter what, that they can come to you. That even if they did one of the things they weren't supposed to do, even if they looked at something they weren't supposed to look at or sent something they weren't supposed to send, that you are their person that they can come to no matter what. Also, keep affirming their self-worth, how amazing they are, how beautiful they are, how wonderful they are. They need to be hearing that from you and other healthy, trusted adults, because the more they can hear that from you, the less it's going to matter or mean coming from a creepy predator. And so just hearing that as often as possible from their trusted adults will make a huge difference. The second thing is sharing those critical thinking tips for relationships. And I know that that is a long standing thing, and it depends on kind of where, developmentally, or where, growth wise, maturity wise, all these different dynamics that you know better than anyone else for your kiddo. But one thing I do with the kids I work with is share sort of green flags of a healthy relationship, orange flags of an unhealthy relationship where it was like, that was kind of toxic, that was not okay, and then red flags of abuse. So, okay, what is a good thing in a relationship? What is a kind of bad thing? What is a really, really bad thing that's never okay, no matter what? So they can kind of see, okay, I didn't like the way that person talked to me. Okay, now I need to get help. I need to talk to somebody right away, and helping them figure out on those different levels, when do I need to seek help, and what's a good thing versus a bad thing versus I need to go talk to my trusted adult. The third thing is keeping up with technology. And I know that's so much easier said than done, right? I can write that out and that's all well and good, but it's a big ongoing thing. It's not a one and done thing. There are so many different privacy settings on each device individually. There are also apps that you can use. There are also different programs that you can use, but each app within itself has privacy settings, and then there are also programs overall. And then there are also pretty good systems on both Android phones and iPhones that you can use to an Apple devices to set up those privacy settings. Also, most gaming systems, all gaming systems have parental controls, but also no matter what, we always get the question of what monitoring system is the best monitoring system. We don't just give out one recommendation because there's no perfect system. Some of them cost a lot. Some of them all of them have some kind of flaw or won't work perfectly for one reason or another. So we do recommend regular and random device checks, especially since that's probably more likely than not your device. So no matter what system you set up, it's still good to say, you know what, I'm going to randomly just check your phone or check whatever it is, and not just checking the apps, but checking browser history, because not all of these things are apps. Some of them are on websites, some of them are in browsers. So doing that, also limiting the screen time that we have. Sometimes I wish someone would limit my screen time. And then limiting where they can have their screens. So I don't think that we need to have our screens all night and in our bedrooms, right? For younger kiddos, they don't necessarily need to be off on their own with the screen, maybe having that in a shared area so that if they do accidentally see something, or if they are all of a sudden getting chat requests from random people, you can be there to say, okay, we don't need to be chatting with this person, or who is this person? And you can be there to kind of regulate that. And again, there's no perfect monitoring app. We do get a lot of folks who have had positive experiences or enjoyed using Bark. That's one we hear a lot. And then the Microsoft Family Safety feature is it's cloud-based, so you can actually hook up or link up a lot of different devices, not just one device. So you can do gaming systems and computers and phones all linked to one device or one cloud-based system. So those are just some. The fourth tip is discussing the consequences of either taking, sending, or forwarding sexual materials. So there's a lot of people who get into a lot of trouble at school. I think if they go to a school, they've probably seen or heard about this. Every school I go out to has had some kind of drama around this. It is technically illegal for kids even to be sending nude images to each other, even to 14-year-olds to be sending it to each other. That is technically disseminating CSAM. And so I try to, equip kids with that knowledge that hey, that is technically illegal, and I don't want you to get into trouble for that. There's also a lot of emotional difficulties that come with that, especially if someone has had their stuff spread to the whole school, if they've been bullied because of that, if they've had people, ostracize them or not be friends with them anymore. And then trying to explain digital permanence. Obviously, that's very hard. I think a lot of adults don't understand digital permanence very well, but like trying to explain that once we send that, we can't get that back, and trying to understand that it's really important that we don't send those things out or put those things out there. And that doesn't mean just like your pictures or other people's pictures, like making sure we're not participating in that in any way or laughing at that or being a part of that in any way. And then the last thing is that if something like this happens, trying to explain the new rules as safety, not just as punishment. And that reframe might sound really small, but I've seen it make a big difference in people's lives. In seeing that, like, hey, I'm not just doing this because I'm mad at you or I think you're bad. I'm doing this because that really scared me and I care about your safety. And here's how you can rebuild trust. Here's what you can do to help me know that you're ready to have this privilege back, because it is a privilege. It's not a right, right? Having a phone is a privilege. It's not an inherent human right, despite what a lot of kids that I work with think. It is a privilege. And if you need to report it, I wanted you to know how you can report it. And then we'll move into, this is the final little bit. If you do feel like your kid is being targeted online, even if they haven't sent anything, if your kid is being asked for images, or if you think that they've actually sent an image, or if anything like this is happening that you're concerned about, one, you can always call us if you have questions. We're always here to help you walk through this process. But if you think that if you see some of these conversations or see that some images have been shared, or an adult is talking to your kid in a sexual way, it's really important, if you're going to report it, that you don't immediately X out of everything or delete everything, even though I understand why you would want to. But unfortunately, that is evidence. So if it's all deleted, then it's harder to investigate that. It's not impossible, but it's harder. So don't immediately close everything down. Don't confront that predator, because if you do, even though I, again, understand why you'd want to, if you confront them, then they'll disappear and then everything will kind of go away. But if you screenshot that and document the username and timestamps, if you do that, like maybe even on a separate device, that just sort of reinforces and saves the evidence. And then you just go to the nearest police department to your house and you hand over those devices, and they will take that and investigate it and get it to the appropriate place to run through all of that. It's really important that you never send those images even to law enforcement, because that is technically sending CSAM. And so even to law enforcement, you don't want to email that or text that. You want to physically bring it in to the police department that's closest to you. But again, if you want us to be there with you to go over that, or be present with you to hand that over, we really do that kind of thing. So I know this is a lot of information in a short period of time. And I know for some of you, you'll be watching this recorded and might not, be present for this, but our information will be here at the end. So I'll send a list of these resources. All of these resources are on the parent packet that I'll send out to you, Linda. So you can feel free to send out our CAP brochure and our parent packet. It'll have all these resources, and then I can leave up my information. You can also send out my information as well.
Thank you for your participation and for being part of a community that learns, connects, and grows together as we build brighter futures for individuals with Down syndrome and their families.